Africa is changing, and Russia is at the center of it. From billion-dollar energy deals and nuclear power plants to mining projects and military partnerships, Moscow's presence on the continent is rising fast. These projects are shaking Western capitals, leaving the US and Europe worried that Africa is slipping from their grip. But what exactly are the top Russian projects making the West panic? And why do they matter so much for Africa's future? Stay tuned, because the answers will shock you. First on the Western insomnia list is not a pipeline, but a glowing $30 billion behemoth rising from the sands of the Mediterranean coast. In Egypt, at El-Dabaa, the Russian State Atomic Energy Corporation, Rosatom, is erecting a titan of modern engineering. 4 advanced VVER 1200 reactors. When fully operational, this single complex will generate 4.8 gigawatts of power, accounting for a massive slice of the energy needs for a nation of over 100 million people. But the genius of the deal is in the fine print. Moscow isn't just building a power plant, it's financing it, with a $25 billion state loan covering 85% of the total cost, repayable over 22 years at a gentle 3% interest rate. And here is the masterstroke. The contract gives Rosatom the responsibility to supply nuclear fuel for the plant's entire 60-year lifespan and, crucially, to manage the hazardous spent fuel. This isn't an investment, it's an umbilical cord. For the next 6 decades, Egypt's energy security will be inextricably linked to Moscow. This creates a security and political foothold brushing against both the Suez Canal and the Eastern Mediterranean that the U.S. Sixth Fleet can patrol but never displace. It's a generational lock-in, bought and paid for with Russian credit. Slide down the continent to Angola, a nation rich in oil and diamonds. The original script fantasized about a simple road, but the reality is far more ambitious. Forget asphalt. Think industrial might. In 2017, Angola gave the green light to a consortium of Russian companies for a staggering $12 billion project to construct a massive 400,000 barrel per day oil refinery complex in the city of Namib. For a country that is one of Africa's largest oil producers, yet ironically imports 80% of its refined fuel, this is a nation-altering development. The project is designed to finally break Angola's dependence on foreign gasoline and diesel. The deal also includes a critical rail link to connect the new industrial hub to the country's main commercial arteries. This single project is backed by a wider Russian financial offensive. Moscow has offered Angola a $10 billion line of credit for a sweeping range of infrastructure projects, from hydroelectric dams to power lines. Simultaneously, Russian diamond giant Alrosa continues to deepen its decades-long partnership in Angola's lucrative mines, extracting the raw wealth that underpins the entire economy. This isn't charity. It's a calculated exchange. Russia provides the capital and technology for industrialization, and in return, it gains preferential access to resources, strategic influence, and debt leverage over a key southern African powerhouse. 1,000 miles northeast of Angola, Russia is making a move that has nothing to do with economics and everything to do with military strategy. While the West focuses on commercial shipping lanes, Moscow is securing a military gateway on one of the world's most critical maritime choke points. After years of negotiation, Russia has secured an agreement to establish a full-fledged naval base in Sudan, right on the coast of the Red Sea. This isn't a commercial port, it's a strategic outpost capable of hosting nuclear-powered warships for up to 300 personnel. The location is everything. This base gives the Russian Navy direct, unimpeded access to the corridor leading to the Suez Canal and the wider Indian Ocean. It allows Moscow to project power, monitor naval traffic, and support operations across the Horn of Africa, the Middle East, and East Africa. While the EU and US are backing the commercial Lobito corridor on the Atlantic coast, Russia has leapfrogged them with a military asset on the much more volatile and strategic Red Sea. This move provides Russia with a permanent, warm-water military foothold that fundamentally alters the security architecture of the entire region. A stark reminder that Moscow's African ambitions are backed by hard power. The El-Dabaa plant in Egypt may be Rosatom's crown jewel, but it is far from its only venture. A quieter, but equally strategic, nuclear gambit is unfolding across the continent. Rosatom has embarked on a systematic campaign to become the indispensable partner for any African nation with nuclear ambitions. In Burkina Faso, a deal has been signed not just for nuclear cooperation, but for the construction of a full-scale nuclear power plant intended to double the country's electricity production by 2030. In Mali, Burundi, Zimbabwe, and Ethiopia, Russia has signed comprehensive memorandums of understanding covering everything from creating regulatory infrastructure and training specialists to the peaceful application of atomic energy in agriculture and medicine. Even in South Africa, the continent's only existing nuclear power operator, Rosatom has inked an action plan with the state utility Eskom for educational initiatives and is promoting its unique floating nuclear power plants as a solution for coastal energy needs. Each of these agreements, while seemingly minor, serves a single purpose: to embed Russian technology, standards, and expertise into the foundations of Africa's future energy grids. It creates a long-term dependency that is far more binding than any simple trade deal, ensuring that for decades to come, these nations will turn to Moscow for fuel, maintenance, and technological upgrades. Moscow's accountants aren't all focused on multi-billion-dollar reactors and military bases. A more subtle, and perhaps more insidious, campaign is underway to capture the next generation of African leaders. Instead of a few scattered, unverified infrastructure projects, Russia is executing a wide-ranging soft power strategy centered on education and technical training. Moscow has dramatically increased the number of state-funded university scholarships available to African students, specifically targeting disciplines like science, technology, engineering, and medicine. These aren't just goodwill gestures. They are long-term investments in creating a continental elite that is educated in Russia, speaks the language, and views Moscow as a partner, not an adversary. This academic diplomacy is woven directly into its hard power deals. The nuclear agreements with countries like Egypt, Burkina Faso, and South Africa all include extensive clauses on human capital development, joint degree programs, and workforce training, ensuring a new generation of African nuclear physicists and engineers are trained by Rosatom. In Sudan, agricultural support programs aim to modernize farming practices with Russian technology. None of this trends on Twitter, but it builds a deep, institutional, and cultural foothold that outlasts headlines and shapes policy decisions for decades. If this is starting to look like a geopolitical masterclass in real time, hit subscribe. We deliver more data and less fluff every single week. Now for the muscle. Where diplomacy and investment are not enough, raw force is applied. This is the domain of the Kremlin's rebranded mercenary force, the Afrika Korps. In the Central African Republic, the model is brutally clear: hundreds of Russian instructors, whose payroll is managed by the Russian Ministry of Defense, not a private company, provide elite protection for the president and his government. In exchange, Russian-controlled firms have been granted sweeping concessions to the country's most valuable resources, including the Ndasima gold mine and several lucrative diamond pits. This is the regime survival package in its rawest form. Moscow guarantees the security of a fragile government against internal threats, and in return, it loots the nation's mineral wealth to fund its global operations and bypass Western sanctions. The same playbook is being run in Mali and Burkina Faso, where the Afrika Korps has displaced French forces and is paid through mining concessions. But the model is evolving. In a stunning display of leverage, Moscow is now demanding the CAR government pay cash for the Afrika Korps services to the tune of $15 million a month, on top of the mineral rights it already holds, a move that is causing friction but also formalizing the Kremlin's direct state control over its African expeditionary forces. So why are Brussels and Washington truly panicking? It's not about ideology. It's about being decisively outmaneuvered. They are staring at the cold, hard reality of geopolitical lock-in. Once a nation like Egypt commits to a 60-year nuclear energy pact with Rosatom, it cannot simply switch to a Western supplier. It is locked into Russian technology, fuel cycles, and political goodwill. When a junta in the Sahel depends on the Afrika Korps for its very survival, it cannot afford to entertain Western calls for democratic reform. The West toolkit is proving to be slow, cumbersome, and ill-suited for this new game. The EU's €150 billion Global Gateway Initiative comes with a mountain of paperwork, environmental benchmarks, and human rights clauses that can delay a project for years. The U.S. Development Finance Corporation often arrives with offers that are too little, too late. Moscow's deals, in contrast, are fast, transactional, and free of democratic pretenses. They are tailor-made for autocratic leaders who need immediate security and are willing to trade sovereign resources for it. The West offers a process. Russia offers a result. And on a continent where many leaders feel ignored or lectured by their former colonial masters, Russia's proposition is finding a dangerously receptive audience. Zoom out, and every one of these individual projects, the reactor in Egypt, the base in Sudan, the mines in the CAR, plugs into a single, breathtakingly ambitious vision: the International North-South Transport Corridor, INSTC. This is Russia's grand strategy for redrawing the map of global trade. The primary route is a 7,200-kilometer network of ship, rail, and road designed to create a sanctions-proof artery stretching from the Arctic, through Russia and Iran, to the shores of the Indian Ocean. But the endgame is even bigger. Russian officials have explicitly stated their intention to connect the INSTC's southern terminus to the east coast of Africa. By stitching its new port access in Sudan and its influence in East African nations into this network, Moscow aims to build a seamless Eurasian African freight highway. This corridor would completely bypass the traditional Western-patrolled maritime choke points of the Suez Canal and the Strait of Malacca. It represents a fundamental challenge to the post-World War II global trade architecture. Analysts in Western capitals who were fixated on China's Belt and Road are now scrambling to understand a Russian gambit that is arguably more direct, more integrated, and more overtly aimed at shattering the existing world order. Here's the final, and perhaps most critical, piece of the puzzle: the assault on the dollar. The fine print on these multi-billion-dollar contracts reveals a quiet revolution. A growing number of Russia's deals in Africa include clauses for payment in local currencies or even direct barter, trading resources for infrastructure. According to Russia's own central bank, the share of its African trade conducted in rubles more than doubled in 2023, now standing at a remarkable 48.1%. Meanwhile, the use of unfriendly currencies like the US dollar and the euro has plummeted. Moscow is actively working with nations like Tanzania to establish systems for direct trade in shillings and rubles, completely cutting out the need for dollar-based financial intermediaries. Every barrel of oil, every diamond, and every shipment of grain that is traded outside the dollar system represents another small cut against the foundation of American global power. It neuters Washington's most potent weapon, financial sanctions, and accelerates the move toward a multipolar world where the U.S. Treasury no longer holds a veto over international commerce. The coffee at Treasury Department briefings on this topic is getting stronger, and the meetings are getting much, much longer. Still here? Tell me in the comments which of these projects you think flips the global power table first, and tag a friend who still thinks Africa's future will be decided in Washington or Brussels. From a nuclear reactor that will anchor Cairo's economy to Moscow for 2 generations, to a naval base that projects Russian power into the Red Sea, this is not a simple investment in Africa. This is the deliberate wiring of an alternate world order, one whose cables, pipelines, and military outposts answer to the Kremlin, not the White House. The West can continue to schedule summits, issue warnings, or promise aid packages that get tangled in bureaucracy. But on the ground, concrete is setting fast. The foundations being laid south of the Sahara have Cyrillic fingerprints all over them, and they are designed for permanent lock-in. Panic might be an overused word in headlines, but it's the right word for any Western planner staring at a map of Africa that is, one strategic deal at a time, turning steadily redder.